The Department of Public Health and Human Services is pleased to bring you Aging Horizons. Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, fraud, legal issues, veterans benefits, and caregiving. Aging Horizons is a program dedicated to inform and prepare Montanans on these timely issues, making a difference to you and your loved ones. Here now is today's program host.
Today on Aging Horizons, we're going to be speaking with Al Ward. He's from AARP's Fraud Watch Network, and he's going to be telling us all about the current scams, schemes, and frauds that you need to be looking out for. He's going to tell us what some of those tactics are, what some of those code words are that you're going to want to watch out for, and then what to do if you think you've been a victim of fraud, and some of the resources that AARP has to offer. So make sure you stay tuned to Aging Horizons.
I think the most pleasant surprise when we turned 65 and signed up for Medicare Part B was finding out about our Welcome to Medicare preventive visit.
It was free, and it gave us the opportunity to visit with our doctors and establish a plan for our health going forward.
They reviewed our medical history, measured our height, weight, blood pressure, and counseled us on other risk factors.
To learn more about Medicare's free or low-cost preventive and wellness benefits, call your local SHIP counselor at 800-551-3191. I mentioned it's free, right?
Twice.
This is Bill. He just received his new Medicare card and is following some simple rules to protect himself from fraud. He knows to never give out his Medicare, Social Security, or bank number over the phone. And this is Nancy. She knows that to detect any problems, she always reads her Medicare summary notice or Medicare Advantage EOB to make sure the billing is correct. Both Bill and Nancy know that anything suspicious can be reported to Montana SMP at 1-800-551-3191.
Receiving help for Ella has been life-changing, and the best word for it is relief. I was the therapist, I was the aide, and I couldn't be the mom because emotionally you're just to your wits' end, you're trying to survive.
I provide care for the Harrises, specifically their daughter Ella. Respite care is extremely challenging, but the rewards that you receive from it are 100 times more than working with a child that doesn't have special needs. Once they get something, it's everything. It's a you celebrate. You don't just enjoy those moments. You celebrate every moment that you get, that you guided them to that next step.
Respite. It's okay to need it. It's okay to want it. Will you provide it? Call 800-224-6034 or visit respite.mt.gov.
It went from survival to enjoying life and being able to be a mom again.
Brought to you by the Montana Broadcasters and this station.
Welcome to Aging Horizons, brought to you by the Department of Public Health and Human Services. I'm your host, Katie Lovell, and today we're speaking with Al Ward. He's from AARP's Fraud Watch Network. And Al, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you. It's nice to be here.
It's always wonderful to get an opportunity to chat with you and pick your brain about fraud.
Thank you.
So, Al, let's just start with just a general definition. What is fraud?
You know, the rule of thumb kind of outline that I have for fraud over the years, because I've been working on it for like 40 years, is that fraud is a situation where people steal money from other people, steal things. It could be other things besides money, but steal things from other people, you know, by fooling them as to who they are or what the intent is or any of the other kinds of things. It's just not very, you know, and people take people at face value.
Sure.
And when you deal with a con, you can't do that.
Absolutely.
You know, for the most part, they're going to be telling you stuff that isn't true. They're going to be picking your brain. And so for the most part, you just have to assume if you get on the phone with the con that you need to get off the phone, because they're not going to do anything but lead you down a rosy path.
And Al, are there some commonalities in the tactics that fraudsters use? What can people be on the lookout?
You know, the things that I think are most common and the things that people need to think about when they get one of these calls is that they're basically going to try and get you excited. They're going to try and make you think that whatever is happening is real, and that they're either going to benefit from it or it's going to cause them problems. And when they get people excited, that's what they call getting people into the ether. Because once they're in the ether, they don't use common sense. And that's the big problem. And the unfortunate thing is that most people take people at face value. And, especially people in rural areas, because they deal with the same people all the time. And so as a result, they think that anybody that calls them on the phone is telling them the truth and is, going to help them. And that's not the case. They have to be really suspicious of strangers, and especially strangers that are bearing gifts or, telling them that they're going to go to jail or whatever.
Sure. Al, are there some red flags in a conversation that you might be able to watch out for if you are having a conversation and you think the person might be a scammer?
Oh, yeah. Tons of red flags. Especially when people start one of the things that I think people do way too often is they treat the person like a friend. Because when the con gets on the phone, he or she, because it's definitely a situation where both sexes are cons. Actually, when they get on the phone, they're going to be really friendly for the most part. Usually to start with, they're really friendly. And so people actually treat them as if they're friends. And that's not good.
Sure.
Because once they do that, then they give them information that they should never share with anybody. And, that's the big problem is, for instance, the grandparent scam is a good example. Half the time when, the scammer calls and says they're, grandson or granddaughter, the first thing out of the mouth of the person on the phone is, "Johnny, is that you?" And they've just given away the name of the grandson or granddaughter. So I mean, there's an awful lot of things like that where people get tripped up into giving information to the con that they can use against them.
And Al, what kind of personal information should folks really be safeguarding?
Any kind of personal information you should never give to a stranger over the phone. I mean, for the most part, there's going to be an introduction and possibly you're going to say what your first name is. But you don't want to tell them your first name and your last name. You don't want to tell them where you are, your address. You don't want to tell them any financial information at all. And that's where cons are really good because the different scams, the con is going to kind of be in control because you're going to think that there's somebody important that you should be talking to. When in effect, they're not important. A lot of times they're calling from a boiler room. And some of them are even reading from a script. But the bottom line is you shouldn't be giving any information, especially financial information, to anybody. And you should never give your social security number or any of those kind of things.
Absolutely. Al, when we get back, I want to talk a little bit more about a very special type of scam, which is any scam that affects seniors. So make sure that you stay tuned. We're going to come back and talk to Al all about elder financial exploitation and abuse.
You've probably seen some big-name celebrities on your TV lately talking about all the Medicare benefits you're missing out on. But the insurance companies who are paying for these ads may be pushing benefits not available in Montana. Fortunately, help is available from a friendly state health insurance assistance program counselor who can help you sort it all out. It's free, and we screen everyone for eligibility regardless of your zip code. It's Montanans helping Montanans. Call today.
Today, class, we'll be discussing the term ombudsman, a word we borrowed from the Swedes and never gave back. Say you're a resident or you have a loved one in long-term care. Now, what do you do if you're not happy with the care and services you receive? You call your long-term care ombudsman, of course. Your ombudsman is available to support you and your rights. An advocate on your behalf could be the ticket. This is your home. If you have questions, the numbers right there below me have all the answers. Class dismissed.
I was diagnosed with diabetes in 1992 and I went into denial. It made me angry. I was a professional chef and I didn't want to change my eating style. It took me a long time to get serious about managing my health. My perspective changed from resentment to one of loving my body, the container for my spirit. Getting help from my diabetes educator supported my goals of improved self-care. I want to feel good and have a great life. My diabetes educator helps me do this.
More fuels, more fires, more fear. You don't have to live in the forest to be threatened by wildfire. In 18 years, the number of fires per year has increased by 1,000 and tripled the acreage burned. Turn it around. Advocate for forest management. Form a group. Craft a plan. Mitigate the fire hazard. You and your community can't dismiss the trend, but you can mitigate the risk. FireSafeMT.org can help. Paid for by FireSafe Helena and aired by the Montana Broadcasters Association.
Welcome back to Aging Horizons. Today we're speaking with Al Ward from AARP's Fraud Watch Network, and he is talking to us all about frauds, scams, and schemes. So Al, when we left off, we were talking about general fraud and scams and schemes, but a topic that I think is close to both of our hearts is elder financial exploitation, abuse, and neglect. Can you talk a little bit about how that's different?
Well, it's different in many ways because a lot of times the person who's actually scamming the person is a friend or a relative, and not a stranger, not somebody that's calling on the phone. Although that does still happen. But for the most part, we're talking about friends and relatives that are taking money or information to use from an elder person. It's kind of sad that family members do that.
Sure.
But it does happen, and a lot of times it could be grandkids that are into drugs or stuff like that. But, there are a lot of reasons why it happens. And in some cases, especially with cultures, the culture actually lends itself to it. Because the grandparent thinks that their responsibility is to take care of the grandchildren. And so they don't talk to anybody about the fact that the grandchild just took $50,000 out of their bank account. They just don't.
And I think one of the commonalities in elder financial exploitation is that there's a lot of times there's a reticence of victims to come forward. Why are senior victims less likely to come forward?
There's a lot of reasons why victims don't come forward in financial exploitation. Number one, obviously, is because it's somebody they know and trust, or that they have some kind of a connection to, and they don't want to get them in trouble. Sometimes it's because they're embarrassed. They don't want people to know that they were silly enough to do whatever they did. A lot of times they're fearful of the fact that if they aren't able to take care of themselves, that eventually they're going to end up in a nursing home. And they don't want that either.
Al, if you have an older family member or friend or neighbor in your community, in your life, and you think that they may be a victim of financial exploitation, abuse, or neglect, what are some of the signs that folks can look out for?
Well, one of the major signs, I think, and this is also for, fraud, other types of fraud, is when you have a person who has been fairly active and all of a sudden is no longer, going to the places that they used to go to. Because what cons and family members sometimes will do is try and isolate the person so that they aren't with people who they can talk to about whatever it is that's going on, because they don't want people to know. And so, that's one of the big red flags, I think, is you have a person that's a good friend of yours and all of a sudden they're not connecting. And I think, one of the things that friends and relatives can do is pay attention to what's going on with their family member or, friend. And when they see somebody withdrawing, find out why.
Absolutely. And then, Al, what are some of the physical signs that someone might notice if their family member is being abused or neglected?
Well, abused, sometimes the signs are more physical. You can see bruises and things like that. But, physical abuse doesn't happen as often as financial abuse.
Sure.
And financial abuse, some of the signs are the person is having trouble paying their bills. They've always had a way of getting, their bills paid, and now they're not able to do it. Or they're maxing out their credit cards. Those kind of things are signs that the person is having financial trouble. And the question is, why are they having financial trouble?
Absolutely. And then, Al, I think a lot of times we think of these scams and schemes as only happening over the phone. Is that where we're seeing most of these scams and schemes happening? Is that the only place that seniors need to be on the lookout for?
No. Actually, they happen on social media. They happen on, as a matter of fact, the romance scam, which is one of the ones that's really common now, is often happening. People meet people, when they're playing games online. They meet people when they're, in chat rooms, different places like that. So, it's not just on the phone. And sometimes I think we focus more heavily on the phone because that's one of the places where a lot of cons, do most of their scams. But, it's not just the phone. It's the internet. It's the social media. It's text messages. There's just a lot of places, especially when you're talking about, some of the phishing scams where somebody is trying to get information from you. It could come as a text. It could come as a, as an email.
Yeah, I get those all the time.
I am getting so tired of all of the extra emails that I get that I can't get rid of. The best thing to do is to go and, unsubscribe or, block them.
Sure.
Because those are the two things that you can do, which will help. The unfortunate thing too is that, especially when you're dealing with phone, with some of the phone banks that they have, they end up with hundreds of phone numbers.
Yeah. Al, when we get back, I want to cover some of the specific scams and schemes, so make sure you stay tuned because we've got some of those coming up for you.
With as many as 1 in 10 Americans at risk for Alzheimer's or some other form of dementia, chances are someone you know and love will receive that diagnosis. When that happens, you may well feel devastated, but know that you are not alone. Help is available. You don't have to face dementia by yourself. Call the free 24/7 Alzheimer's Association helpline, 800-272-3900, for guidance and support.
It's been 27 years. I never thought I'd still be smoking, but here I am, COPD and all. I'm about to have a granddaughter. There's so much to show her, but I'm scared I won't be able to keep up like I used to. I kind of gave up on myself on quitting. But it's different now. I want to be here for her and for my daughter.
Every generation produces heroes, men and women who step forward to defend our country in time of need, no matter the personal cost to themselves. And though we can never fully repay them, we can make sure they have access to low-cost, long-term care when they need it. That's what Montana's Veterans Homes are all about. If you've got a hero in need in your family, call us. We can help.
Sergeant Jones. Please respond. I was separated from my squad. Requesting backup. Anyone? Please respond. I'm all alone here.
Welcome back to Aging Horizons. We are speaking with Al Ward from AARP's Fraud Watch Network, and we're talking all about scams and schemes. Al, let's talk about one of the worst ones that we see really frequently, and that's a grandparent scam. Can you explain what that is?
Well, it's basically you get a phone call at night and grandson has gotten in trouble, is in jail, or, has some kind of a problem, is in a hospital, and needs money. And the thing is, that's one of those emotional things that a grandparent is not going to, turn away from. But one of the things that I need to say here is that the grandparent scam is just one of many what we call imposter scams.
Sure.
And in this case, the person is, taking the role of a grandson or granddaughter. But they happen, there's so many of them, and a lot of them are government imposter scams. So you end up with the IRS calling and saying that you owe back taxes and you better, you better come through with payment. The thing that's ironic about a lot of these scams is that they usually try to get you to do things like go down to, a pharmacy and, get a gift card to pay the bill.
And Al, can you pay any type of government bill with a gift card?
No, you can't. And the bottom line for me is when I heard that the first time, I said, I don't remember ever paying my taxes with an iTunes card. But that's one of the things that's a real big red flag. If they ask you to make payment with a gift card, it's a scam. It's always a scam because nobody accepts payment with gift cards. The other thing is wire transfers are also a big red flag. If they ask you to make payment with a wire transfer, one of the things you need to know about that is that they're impossible to trace.
Sure.
So that's why they try to get people to use wire transfers.
And so once that money leaves you, it's gone.
It's gone. Yeah. And that's the sad thing, because a lot of these cons, aren't from this country. As a matter of fact, there are some countries that are actually actively involved in cons. So a lot of times, I remember we had some cons that were going on because one of the people that I talk to all the time is the regional director of the Federal Trade Commission. And he was very serious. He said, these cons are coming from South America. But they're very good, A lot of times you end up with a con that you can't understand because they're from another country.
Sure.
And that sometimes is a red flag. But the bottom line, too, is that a lot of these cons from other countries speak English better than we do. So you can't just go by that.
Sure. When you think that you might be talking to one of these imposters, or an imposter from a federal government or someone pretending to be a family member, what are some of the things that you can do to check to see if that person's from a legitimate source?
Well, first of all, the federal government doesn't make calls to individuals without, having had some contact before. So if you get a call out of the blue and they say they're from the IRS or from the Secret Service, or like with the lady that was on here the last time from the DEA, that was one of the things that really puzzled me, because I didn't know, when I listened to that interview, I didn't know what the DEA had to do with what they were talking to her about.
Yeah.
So I mean, the problem is you're not going to get a call out of the blue. You might end up, if somebody's investigating you, they may come out and talk to you in person, but they're not going to call you on the phone. So, it's sometimes we're too eager to support like law enforcement, or we're too eager to believe that somebody is what they say they are.
Sure.
And that's just not the case.
And I think one of the ways that seniors can avoid participating in these scams is making sure that they're not oversharing online. I know a lot of those grandparent scams get some of their information from social media sites, things like that, we've shared about our kids going to Mexico or anything like that.
Well, and the unfortunate thing about social media is you don't want to put a lot of information on it, especially personal information about grandkids. Names and that sort of thing are probably not things that should be in a post that's on social media.
Absolutely. Well, Al, I just want to thank you so much for all of this important information. I know I learned a ton, and it was great for our viewers to hear it as well. And if folks need resources, heading over to AARP's Fraud Watch is a great place to go. AARP always has really great information on the current scams and schemes. Make sure you stay tuned to Aging Horizons in the future, and thank you for watching.
Special thanks to the Department of Public Health and Human Services for their continued support. Hosts on Aging Horizons are program specialists at the Montana Office on Aging. Production facilities provided by Video Express Productions. For more information about Aging Horizons, call the Department of Public Health and Human Services toll-free at 800-332-2272.